All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the 2026 Nebraska Public Schools Employer Reporting Workshop. This is a live webinar. We have the entire crew here today. My name is John Tidwell. I'm one of the training specialists here with the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement Systems. I'm going to be your host today. But my role is very quite small here. We have some very good speakers today. We have Samantha Speaker from accounting, and then we have Vanessa Holen she's the manager of our internal auditing team here. All right, with that being said, I believe it is time to bring up Samantha. All right, Sammy, you there? You ready to go?
Yep, I'm here. Hello. I'm going to start out like we will probably do for the foreseeable future, discussing the new contribution rate changes. This year, starting July 1, is going to be the employee contributions of 7.25% and the employer contribution of 7.3225%. I do want you to focus on that employer contribution rate. We did send out some conflicting information previously. We had it only down to 7.32%, and we need to change that to the full 7.3225%, because, again, if you've ever heard me discuss before, our system wants 101% employer match of the employee contributions. So for it to be fully correct, it needs to be the 4 digits there for the employer contribution portion. And this will last until August next year, because I will transition here. Starting next year in 2027, instead of the contribution rate changing effective date of July 1, it will be changed to September 1 report. This was from feedback from you guys because you would rather have your contribution rate changes connected with your school years. So that was why this is in place. This year will still be July 1. It should be your next report here. It will still be this new contribution effective date in July 1, but next year will be in September. And this is like a request from the actuary group that calculates these contribution rate changes. They told my boss, who told me to present to you the request to please submit your June reports in the future as soon as you can really get them in, because they calculate these contribution rate changes based on the state fiscal year, the school plan fiscal year, and that is from July to June. So no matter what the contribution rate change date is, it's going to be separate from this. They do want the June report in as soon as you can really get it. Also note for the June report, we're also waiting on for the school member statements that you get every year. You guys get them. All of your members get them. They are also dependent on when these June reports get put in. So yeah, just a request from us to you. Please get your June reports in as quickly as you can get them. I mean, stuff comes up. There's not going to be any extra penalty for it, but it is just a request from us to get this report in as soon as possible. Part of your jobs as reporting agents is to provide any new members in the school plan with the new member information packet. That includes the handbook, the beneficiary form, and the application for vesting credit. These are not enrollment forms. Your only job with these is to provide them with these materials. It is not your job to give them any information, to follow up, to keep any record of what they turn in for these. And like I said, it's not even, you don't even have to know, you don't have to know anything about these. I do have on here, the bend form needs to be physically mailed with their original signature. In the application the vesting credit form needs to be with 180 days of employment to be valid. But even then, that is not your job to tell them that information. It is only your job to give them that information, and you do not need these back. These are not, and to reiterate, these are not eligible, this is not enrollment paperwork. And this is review for probably most of you, but just in case we have any new people, your monthly reports, the wage and contribution reports, are due on the 10th of the next month. So your June 1st report would be due on July 10th. Your August report will be due on September 10th. There is a late fee past that point. The only thing we are looking for on the 10th due date is going to be you confirming the report. That's all we need from you for that. There is another late fee that gets applied if this is not in by the end of the month. If anything comes up, just let us know. I mean, we're here. We're not. It's really to get these stuff in because we need this stuff in. But if something comes up that you need an extension, just let us know and we'll help you out. Anytime you are submitting the report, you can check for any errors under edit. If you seem to have any issues with the report, you can always verify it, revalidate it. The revalidate button is just like a reload button. You should be familiar with that if you use computers at all. It's just basically a reload button to, if the report's kind of getting stuck, that helps you through. And like I said, for errors, you can check your errors under the edit button. If there is any errors, that record will be popped up, and you will just click on there and you can do any adjustments, you can enter any notes, what have you. If you want to know where the notes section is, I do have a diagram off to the side here. It is going to be slightly different than what you guys see because this is what we see. So the notes section is either going to be just before the demographic information or just at the end. So if you ever need to put a comment in there for us regarding this member, you can put it there. This note is only for that member. If you have any notes or comments about your report you want to give us that is for the entire report, then send us an email. Because yeah, this note is just for the member, and if you have anything for the whole report itself, then just send us an email. And anytime the report will not let you confirm your report, it is going to be one of these reasons. This time of the year, it's usually the contribution amount does not match the correct what the system needs it to be. The only fix for this is to going into that member's record and then changing the contribution rate. That is the only thing there. The other ones that you might have an issue with is if you're not seeing any flags pop up, even after revalidating your report, it is generally the employer contributions is not the 101% match. So those are the two things to be aware of, especially this time of year. The other major flag that is going to stop your report from confirming is going to be the hire date within 1 month of the pay period begin date. This is a catch in our system because we want to catch anybody who should have had contributions to begin with. So for any part-timers who were not eligible previously and now they became eligible, and so this flag is popping up for that reason, change their hire date on our record to be the retirement eligibility date. You do not need to change their hire date on your records. This is just for the record reported to us. And these are the most common flags that we will be asking about, or you will see if you check the edit potentially. Hours that exceed the upper limits. So that's anybody who has more than 300 hours listed. That's an unusually high amount of hours. So this is just, we're wanting to know why they have so many hours. If you're expecting it, just leave us a note in that comment box or send us an email or just respond to our emails when we ask. If not, hey, this might be a benefit to you if your report uploaded strangely, then yeah, this helps catch issues like that. And then hours reported to zero, generally we should not be seeing 0 hours worked when there's wages and contributions reported. This is, to catch any leave of absences, anybody quitting or what have you. So this is, yeah, just give us a comment in the box. And if you do have anybody on a leave of absence, you do need to provide us with a non-con form. So when we have this issue every year in January, somebody changed an employee's name before the social security card was looked at, and then it gets changed back when you do taxes. So request from us to you, please use their full legal name every time you enter them on these reports. No nicknames. Do not change anybody's last name until you see that updated social security card. And if this flag does pop up for you, I do have that listed there on the PowerPoint at the bottom. And like I mentioned earlier, these non-con forms, it provides us with documentation on why somebody is having a break in contributions. That can be terminating, permanently gone from your school, or this can be a leave of absence. If the termination date, if you have any questions on what to put for termination date, I do link where you can find that information in the manual. There's quite a few situations, different options for that, so which is why I'm not covering it here, because it is a full page in the manual, and it is right there laid out nice and easy for you. So that is why I have it just linked here. I want to mention in the survey that got sent out before we started doing these seminars, I had a few people asking me about the bottom of these permanent non-con forms. So just to quick cover it here, in the red box, it is going to be the last wage and contribution reports that are going to show up on our system. We have one section for the wages and one section for the hours because not all of you report them matching or even at the same. So that's just when we should expect to see them for the last time. In the blue box there, that is regarding your payroll dates, and the last time they're going to show up for your payroll system. And in the yellow box there is the last day they are physically at work. This could match the termination date. It is just dependent on certain cases and what have you. Our nice shiny new missing non-con portal. You should be aware of it because it is right next to the create a non-con, look up a non-con, and now there's the missing non-con. It is a great tool, and you even from right there, you're able to, if you hit that fix button, it shows you these options, whether you could submit a new non-con from right there or tell us you've already submitted one, or if you have an ineligible member, you do not need to submit a non-con for an ineligible person, so that is why the option is there. This is a great tool. It's not a crutch because there are some issues with this, such as once you hit the already submitted a non-con, they will never pop up on this list ever again for that employment. So you could potentially have someone who you submitted a non-con for a leave of absence, and then they would terminate, I don't know, 5 years later, they will not pop up on this list at that given time. So this is a great tool. It is still your responsibility to know when you need to send in these non-cons. And going from the non-cons and going into adjustments, one of the questions we sent out in the survey was just how do you guys report on each given wage and contribution report? And then these are the results that we got. So you can see why we can't be super specific on what you need to put in for certain areas of adjustments or more descriptive on for the non-cons. This is why, because you guys are all over the board. Yeah, most of you are 1 month in arrears consistently, but that's not even half. So this is kind of why we can't be super descriptive on some of the areas for adjustments in particular. And just before I leave this page, there were 8 of you who said you were unsure on what's on your wage and contribution report. I am telling you, you need to find out because we do not know. We can make educated guesses for salary members, but for hourly, I mean, we would have no idea. That is one thing we rely on you entirely for. So going in, please do that. And yeah, going into adjustments. So the statute is very clear on when retirement contributions, how retirement contributions are reported. So all wages and hours should be reported when worked. So it's very clear on that. So adjustments are used for any time to reconcile how you guys pay them versus how they need to be reported, or if there's any errors that, errors happen for everybody. Some people get missed. So adjustments are kind of all encompassing for all of these two areas. You will be filling out an adjustment form and then entering in them on your wage and contribution report. These adjustment forms can be sent to us through email, faxing, a secure share file upload, or a secure encrypted email. Any of these options work for us. Yeah, when you're entering adjustments on our system, they are a true adjustment. You are not replacing what is in our system. So when I am going through, it is going to be, I will go into the next page and it'll be better explained. Oh, sorry, next couple pages. But when do you need to do adjustments? If there's any mistaken excess contributions reported, you're going to go back within 1 year of the date of discovery. They will get that money at the end of the day, but it will not be part of the retirement calculation. Anytime you have missed contributions or contributions that should have been reported, we will always need these to be submitted, whether it was last month, 20 years ago, we will always need adjustments for these instances. And if you have any ineligible issues popping up, please contact us. These can kind of go all over the board, so just contact us. We can give you better instructions on how to move forward with that. And here's the adjustment form. You guys should be pretty familiar with this. This is to give us a template. This is to give you a template on when you are entering adjustments in our system. It gives us documentation. You can find these adjustment reports in the forms on our website. This form only has 12 lines at a given time, so if you need to send in a bunch of adjustments, we do offer a high capacity form for you to do many different adjustments. Things to be aware of with the contribution rate changing every single year, depending on when you're doing adjustments, you need to focus on when the adjustments are occurring because the adjustment rate will change depending on those dates. If you have a long-term adjustments to enter, you may have multiple forms that you need to fill out because of these contribution rate changes. Yeah, and then going how to fill out the adjustment report form. The yellow box is going to be the wage and contribution reporting period that is getting adjusted. Blue is for hours, blue is going to be the hours that were reported to us. Purple will be what it should have been reported, and then red is going to be the automatically calculated on these forms will be what the adjustment amount is actually going to be. And this is what you will enter on our system when entering these adjustments. And then this will just be the compensation or the salary on our system is going to be here. Yellow is going to be what was reported. Blue is what it should have been. Purple is going to be the difference. And then the red is going to be the employee contributions. And those last two are going to be automatically calculated depending on what you put in the first two columns. And then, yeah, the totals will enter there at the bottom. Red is going to be the wage and contribution report you were entering these adjustments on. So if you were adjusting somebody's record back in June and you're entering that on the September report, you're going to put the September wage and contribution report there in red at the bottom. So when you are uploading your adjustments, make sure you upload your monthly report first before you start working on adjustments. If you don't do that in the correct order, it will not let you do it. You will have to delete everything that you have done and restart from the beginning. So make sure you do that. To enter adjustments, you will go through the edit button that I showed earlier, enter the name, the social security number of the person you were entering adjustments for, add new record, and then it will pull up a new record. You will change the drop down from regular to adjustment and go from there. And like I said previously, the adjustment form is a template. It is there to help you as much as it helps us. Then once you are done entering all of your adjustments, you will need to enter in the employer contribution amount. That will just be, you will just go into your update header and you're going to just add in or subtract the employer contribution adjustment amount from your total employer contributions for your monthly report. Save, revalidate it, and you should be good to confirm your report and you'll be done. And here's just a template on how you enter an adjustment on our website based off of what the adjustment form, how the adjustment form is filled out. Purple will be the date range that you're adjusting, and then yellow will be the hours adjustment. Red will be the employee's reported compensation salary, and then the blue is going to be the employee's contribution amount. And that's all I have. This email, if you ever need to reach us here in accounting regarding your reports, you can email us at this email. You will get me and Stephanie. Right now, most likely you will be getting Stephanie. We're there to help you. And if you ever have any sort of questions, you can email us and we can forward it on to if it's supposed to go to somebody else. So yeah, somebody should always have this email. That's all I have.
My name is John Tidwell. I'm one of the training specialists here with NPERS, that is the Nebraska Public Employees Retirement Systems, which basically means my job is I go out and I do seminars, in-person seminars where I meet the potential retirees. Now, I understand you guys are employer reporters, but guess what? You guys are also members of this plan. So we certainly want to invite you and encourage you to come out to our seminars, not only to be better prepared to help out with other members, but to help yourself get prepared for retirement. Now, we do understand that you wear a lot of hats in your roles and that retirement is only a small piece of the pie there. And so part of my mission here as Education Services is to make your life a lot easier. We understand a lot of the members come up and ask you a lot of pointed questions. And so we've been working hard over this last year to give you more tools to work with. In the past, we've had a bunch of long version videos that could be 2 or 3 hours, where it might be versions of our online webinars. What we've done is we've made a series of short topic specific videos, whether it's about the rule of 85, whether it has to do with eligibility or the different retirement options, which basically, in essence, it has to do with what are the death benefits and helping people choose the right plan for themselves. We put all this out on the website, and our invite to you is to let us know what else we can do for you. We understand that there are still some pain points out there. So if you can send us an email or give us a phone call, we'll put that on the list and see what we can do to make your life a bit easier. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. Currently, this year, we've got a bit of a focus on citizenship eligibility status, okay? Later, Miss Vanessa is going to talk extensively about this topic, but I'll go ahead and just give you the short version of it. When somebody joins and you're deciding whether or not to enroll them in the retirement plan, you need to check their eligibility. And if you go through the eligibility checklist or the immigration checklist, one of the first things that list is to check their immigration status. And you might notice here in red where it says that DACA citizens are not eligible to participate in this retirement plan. That is now codified in, you'll see in the slide, in Nebraska State Statute 4-108. So if you ever have questions about that, you can always go online and read that state statute. But we know not everybody's into statutes like me, Mr. Former Military, that likes to go over the rules and regulations. So we've created some checklists for you, and it's going to list all that information. So we had a question the other day. Somebody asked, "Hey, what if we have somebody? They might have a driver's license and a social security number. How am I supposed to know if they're DACA?" That's where you look at their immigration status paperwork, and you'll see you're going to be looking for that code C33. That would indicate that they are DACA. Now, beyond that, let's say you're looking at their immigration status paperwork and they are here legally, then that's great. Then we can go ahead and if they meet all the other requirements, they can be enrolled in the retirement plan. You as employer reporters, you do have an obligation or responsibility to make sure you keep a copy of that documentation. Now, what happens if those documents expire? Well, then we need to go ahead and make sure they get extended. Now, it's unreasonable to ask an immigrant to go back to their home country to get updated documents. So you can see right here, let's say if the Department of Homeland Security or U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, if they extend that, we can accept that. Just make sure you keep that documentation on file. There was another change that was made as far as the statutes last year where we actually expanded upon the list of approved documents we'll accept. Now we accept a state learner's permit. That's for driving, all right? So the reason I bring that up is if we ever make any changes, we'll update that in statute. And we're also going to update that in those different checklists there for you. So we're always going to make it available to you. So as time goes by, please make sure you go out to our website at npers.ne.gov to make sure you're getting the most updated checklist and employer reporting manuals. I do want to talk briefly about mandatory participation. And again, Vanessa's going to cover this far more in depth. As a quick reminder, we're talking about regular employees. We're not talking about substitute. We're not talking about temporary. We're talking about regular, somebody that's coming back on an ongoing basis. If they come in and we know that their intentions are to work 20 hours or more per week, then we want to go ahead and enroll them in the plan. They don't have to fill out a form. You go ahead and enroll them. Now, that's where we're saying the intentions. Again, much later, or a bit later, Vanessa's going to talk about the difference between at least and then maximum of. Now, if somebody comes in and we're not sure, like if their intentions are not to be working 20 hours or more per week, at that point, we want to go ahead and start tracking. I'm sure you guys are all very familiar with that. If over the course of that calendar year, you're going from July through June, if they have 3 months that they average 20 hours per week, at that point, we will enroll them the next paycheck. All right. And there could be a gap. There could be a gap of time. And keep that in mind. We're going to have some scenarios for you a little bit later. Another quick reminder, this is kind of old school. This happened last year. We wanted to remind you, let you know that there was an update as far as when somebody can submit their retirement application. We've now extended it out to 270 days. So meaning somebody might come walking into the school building this August or September, and in very short fashion, they could apply for retirement benefits a little bit later. So it's 270 days. And here's the big point that I want to push for when it comes to education services. I mentioned that we have several retirement videos out there. And so I'm just going to be kind of scrolling through here. Some of them are the generic ones for like Social Security or Medicare. We've got the online webinars as well, but you're going to see we have elder fraud, how to use the benefit estimator, what the rule of 85 is. Maybe if somebody wants to purchase time to try to go ahead and raise their benefits. We've built several topic specific videos out there. You go out to npers.ne.gov and then under member info, you're going to see a video selection. Then from there, they just choose school and they're going to see all those options. Our videos are also housed out on our YouTube channel. So yes, believe it or not, we have a YouTube channel. Just look for Nebraska Public Employees Retirement Systems. We do encourage you to go ahead, like, subscribe, click that notification bell. So as we upload videos, you're going to know about that, okay? Because information is power. And the last thing I want to talk about is pre-retirement education. Hey, if you guys are not aware, each member can come to 2 pre-retirement seminars or webinars. So we recommend that everybody goes early and they go often. The way it works is these seminars are packed full of information. They're going to be there all day, so we give them as much information as we can. A lot of people feel like they're trying to drink from a fire hydrant. So the first time they go, they're overwhelmed and they start formulating their plan. By the time they go back for their second seminar, now hopefully they've got a plan and they're double checking to make sure they've checked all their boxes. So not only for the member, but for yourself. Let's make sure everybody comes out to these seminars or the webinars as well. And I note when it comes to those webinars, and the webinars are only 3 hours, like this morning's webinar. In the afternoons, typically for in person, we do things like talk about Social Security, Medicare, estate planning, and elder fraud. We don't offer that on the webinar. So the members have over the next 48 hours time to go ahead and watch those videos. So make sure everybody is aware of their full benefit. And with that, that brings an end to my portion of this morning's webinar. And I'm going to bring up Vanessa Holan. Vanessa is the manager of our internal auditing team, and she's going to be talking to you guys for about the next 2.5 hours. So make yourselves comfortable, make sure you got your coffee. And Vanessa, are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's see if I can share here. All right. Well, welcome everyone. I apologize. I shut my blinds, but it looks like the sun is coming in somewhere. So sharing my video, but you can't see me. Just an introduction of myself. If you have not talked with me or if you have not seen me speak or you're new. So my name is Vanessa Holan. I lead the internal audit department here at NPERS. I've been with NPERS for going on 6 years now. I spent the first year conducting employer audits. So what that means is I would contact the schools, counties, and do the audits that you all receive from the audit team. Being here 6 years, I keep thinking the plan's going to get easier. Things are going to get easier. But every year, it just reminds me just how hard the plan documents are and how grateful I am that you all are here and you all are trying to do your best to keep abreast with the different law changes and be in compliance with the plan. What you have is a unicorn of a plan. It's a defined benefit plan, which just high level, simply put, means that your lifetime benefit is not contingent upon the contribution amount that you put into the plan. So there's a formula for your benefit, and it includes your service credit, so how long you've been on the job and contributing to your retirement, and a formula factor, and then your highest year's salary. So with that being said, it's not unreasonable that somebody would have an account balance of maybe a couple $100,000 with a payout of $1 million for a lifetime benefit. So I tell you that so that you understand. Number one, again, unicorn of a plan. There's not a lot of these plans left. Your plan is expensive to run and it's high risk just because of that factor, right? So we need to make sure that we are all on the same page in making sure that we are in compliance and we don't do anything that would jeopardize the IRS status of the plan. If you don't know, NPERS is charged with administering 7 plans. So the school plan is just one of them. There are some other defined benefit plans. We also have completely different 401A plans, and we won't get into those. And I tell you that simply so that when I thank you all for being here, and John said it earlier, I say it at every single workshop or every single webinar that I do, that I am so grateful that you're here, that I understand that retirement is such a small piece of what you do, that you are tasked with so many other components, but the importance of that small piece is so dynamic, right? So Thank you. We understand, let's be on one team here. A couple of other things. I just want everybody to know that this plan is mandatory, not voluntary. So when we go over certain things, know that once they meet mandatory eligibility, then as long as they remain a regular employee, they're in the plan. The structure of today's presentation is going to be based off of the survey that I had sent out earlier. So if you came to last year's, you will see that it's a lot like last year's. Prior to the presentation, I sent out a survey. I did that to make sure that we are giving you the information that you need, right? Audit can sit back, everybody else, all the other departments can sit back and say, these are kind of our pain points. And we can say where we think people are struggling, but in order to give you the best information, we wanted to know, where are you struggling? Where do you think you're struggling? So I just simply took the answers from the survey and plugged them into this presentation. What I did find was that overall, for the people that answered, it was 121 this year, that the complexity level from those that answered last year, there was only 88 that answered last year, was lower. Said in other words, people felt like, or at least they replied to the survey, that they understood it a little bit more this year. And some of that maybe is the termination of employment rules. And we did that huge webinar where there were hundreds of people on that webinar, and we explained the rule change there. And we believe the termination of employment rules got easier. And some of that could just be too that we're coming to these and we are working through and we're figuring things out. So what you'll see when we go through this webinar is there's going to be some red boxes with words in them. What I did this time was just simply copy and paste. So if there was a question that somebody had in that survey, I just pasted it into the PowerPoint. I wanted you to see exactly what they said. Sometimes the questions or the phrases that were there, maybe we're not super happy with audit, and that's okay. I wanted you to see exactly how people felt, because they may not be the only one, right? But we have broad shoulders in audit. We understand. Nobody wants to be audited. I don't want to be audited. You don't want to be audited. It's typically not a fun place to be. The APA, the state auditors, they do audit NPERS 4 times a year. The school plan is audited once a year. And what the state auditors do is they'll go out to the employers, and if the employers have an issue, such as they didn't enroll somebody when they should have, or they enrolled somebody that they shouldn't have, or they reported on incorrect compensation, then those become an NPERS audit point. And the state auditors have continuously said, if the employers keep getting it wrong, then it could go in to your audit report. Audits have 2 different reports from the state auditors. One is public and one is not. Typically, the employer's portion of that has been in the non-public one, but they do say if they continue, they'll be in the public one. So we don't want to have public audit points. And so our goal is to just work through with you, right? And figure these things out. If you receive an audit from NPERS Internal Audit, those are not public record. We have tried to change it so that they're an education process, right? We will have a kickoff meeting with you. We will talk about what the rules are, full transparency. It's not a gotcha. It is 100%. Here's what the rules are. Here's where we are at now. And then we'll go through steps to test things. And at the end, we like to make sure that an audit at the end does 2 things. It assures you, number one, the things that are in compliance. And here's all the things that we didn't find one issue in. These were great. And then the other half of that are, here are the things where we can hopefully affect positive change moving forward to get into compliance with the plan rules. So you will see the red boxes. You will see exactly what the questions are. That's what we're going to go over. One thing that was asked of me to say to everybody before we get started and start the poll questions coming in and look at how the survey results were, was just to remind everybody that if you receive an email from NPERS, make sure that you are forwarding it on to your members if it pertains to your members. So NPERS doesn't have a way to collect members' email addresses. We have a way, but let me say that in other words. We don't necessarily get members' email addresses all the time. There's a lot of them that we don't have, but we certainly have the employers, right? So we try to give out information to members, which would include all of you, but we do that a lot of times by sending an email to the employers with the expectation and hopes that you can send it to all the members. So when you get an email from NPERS, especially a newsletter or a mass notification or some rule changes or something like that, please just take a minute to look at it and make sure you're forwarding it on to the members if that's the expectation on that. We just want to make sure we're getting everybody the information that they need. So the slide that you're looking at is which school employer workshops are you attending? And this just shows me everybody that actually filled out the survey. So 51 of you filled out the survey. So 51 of you will probably know a little bit more of what I'm referring to when I say the survey questions. But even if you didn't fill it out, that's okay. This will be self-explanatory as well. Again, I said 88 filled it out last year. There's 121 that filled it out this year. So that's a huge increase. Next year when we send out this survey, let's shoot for more than that. We want to give you the information that you need. Last year we asked the same question, and this chart looked very similar to last year. So how long have you been in your position? I use this so that everybody knows nobody's alone here, right? So a little over half have been here for 6 years or more. A little under half have been here 5 years or less. So for those of you that have been here 5 years for less, that's pretty new. I mean, it takes somebody working the school plan 40 hours a week, 50, 60 hours a week, continuously for a year here at NPERS to feel like they have a good grasp of it. So when it's just a small piece of what you do, I feel like 5 years and under that's still fairly new. I would still fall into that category. Are you the only person responsible for retirement at your district or ESU? This looks very similar to last year as well. There's almost 3/4, right, that are handling all of this on your own. So although you may be alone at your employer, you're not alone in this. Reach out, talk to other schools, see how they're doing it, talk to NPERS. Of course, I'm an auditor, right? So I always want there to be multiple people working on something. That segregation of duties, that's a big thing that auditors push. It helps prevent fraud. It helps align and comply. So that's huge. But this year, what I thought was interesting, because last year I was focusing in on that. I share duties by myself, and that's hard. It's just me. This year, we have received a lot of feedback from those that actually share their duties with someone else, where it makes it hard as well. So Sally in payroll maybe goes to the workshops and has been doing this for a while and has a good feel for it, but John in HR maybe doesn't. And maybe he doesn't have the ability to go to HR, but you both do completely different things, where John is concerned about eligibility and in payroll, you're concerned about what's pensionable. Those two things have to align. Have you ever personally been involved in an audit? So we asked this last year, we're asking this again. It's about 8.5 years in between a full school employer audit. So it doesn't surprise me that there's still a lot that say no. However, over the last 2 years, we've started a new member review every year for all 265 schools. So if you had new members, then you would have been reviewed. It doesn't necessarily mean Aaron would have reached out to you, but if you had new members, he reviewed. So for schools that had new members at 1,000 hours plus, then he didn't look at those employees. But if they're less than 1,000 hours, then he was looking at those. So hopefully everybody at least has been involved in some type of review and some communication with audit. What I did this year, though, I thought was interesting to just compile the data and see if I could get any other information from this. So when we're looking at the 3, sometimes I think when people fill out surveys and they hit that middle of the row, you have 1 to 5 and you just hit the 3s, right? You're not really fully ready to commit to either one. It's not, a 2 where 1 is not comfortable, I frequently need help, and 5 is expert, others come to me with questions. So you really don't want to commit on a 2 or a 4. You don't feel comfortable, you don't feel uncomfortable. So even if we take out the 3s and we take out, the 52 people that said, maybe, what I thought was interesting was that 54 of the responses hit 4s. So they may not say they're an expert, but darn it, they've got a pretty good grasp for what's going on. And then how little there was on the 1 to 2. Did 8 people out of the 121 responses hit a 1 or a 2? So to me, it makes me feel like, okay, maybe we're getting there. What I thought was interesting as well is the 1 person that's called it a 1, that's not comfortable, I frequently need help, shares duties. I thought that was interesting. Then if we look at the length of time people have been with NPERS, again, sometimes we focus on you haven't been here long, so therefore it makes sense that it's harder. If we look at the 1 person that said, 1, they need help, they've been here 10 plus years. Interesting, right? To me, that maybe says something like the rules keep changing and I get used to this set of rules. I feel like I have it figured out, and then the rules change and it just makes it harder. And then I'm trying to focus on, well, this time frame to this time frame was this rule, and this time frame to this time frame was this rule. And I could be making assumptions, but I also think that this chart helps you understand that everybody's all over the place, right? I mean, to me, it makes sense that if you look at the right side of the chart, 3 years and under are the 2s, the struggling. That makes sense to me. Like, I feel like I've got it figured out, but maybe not necessarily all the way. But I want you to know it's okay at whatever level you're at. That's okay. We're here to help. Reach out to other employers. You can get some help. You're not in this alone. Now, the next slide, though, this is where of course, I'm audit, right? And I want to see, is what we're doing in audit making a difference? I don't know. When we compared those that said they have had an audit versus those that haven't, then what does that look like when we compare it to your overall comfort level? What are you all saying on the overall comfort level? So that dark green are those that were involved in an audit. The light green were the people that responded that they were not involved in an audit. Remember, the 5 was, I'm an expert. And the 1 was, I'm struggling, I really need help. So you'll notice the dark green is all 3, 4s, and 5s, while the light green, none of those even made it to a 5. So you look at the data, and of the 75 reporting agents who have been involved in an NPERS audit, not one of them rated it a 1 or a 2. So 69% rated themselves at a 4 or higher. Now, can we correlate the two? I don't know, but I would like to say or to think maybe that, okay, if you've had an audit, maybe you feel more comfortable at the end. Maybe the education part and the walking it through and that one-on-one, taking a realistic, transparent look at what your processes and controls are based on what the rules are, maybe that is helpful. Because of the 37 agents with no audit experience, 16% rated their overall comfort level at 1 or 2, and only 19% rated it a 4. So I say that just to give us a plug for audit. If it's your time, if we come knocking on your email inbox and saying you're up on the audit list, just know, I mean, we truly are one team. We are here because we want to help, and we'll get it through it together. We don't like being audited either. I'm going to throw this up here because this still surprises me. I asked this last year, and I can't remember the exact number of no's last year. But this year, 18 people still said no, they don't use the school employer manual to help. Now, maybe those 18 people were all in the expert level and maybe they've got it figured out. They don't need to use the manual. That could be the case. You're going to hear me say this a couple of times in here, and I'm going to tell you why now. We sit around the table every single year, and we go through that manual word by word, line by line, paragraph by paragraph, and page by page. I assure you we do that. We bring in food. We put a meeting longer than anybody wants to be a part of. We do it over a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks to give us some fresh eyes, but we go over this and we change things a lot dependent upon what the feedback is. So if you're not using the manual, we're never going to know what's not in there that we could easily answer in the manual for your questions, right? We're not going to know what's written in the manual that maybe we think is easily understood, but when you go for application to your processes or your school, it doesn't make sense. So plug in for the manual. We will go over it a lot today, but I'm going to challenge everybody that before they come to NPERS with a question, and not because we don't want your phone calls, not because we don't want your emails, and not because we don't want to help, but before you come to us with a question, go to that manual. See if you can answer your question. And if not, when you ask the question, tell us, I went to the manual and this is not in there. I went to the manual and it says this, but this really confuses me, right? And then when we have our annual review and we go over the thing in its entirety, we can make sure that we are giving you the tools that you need, because we know you don't like to reach out to us every single time you have a question. I mean, we're here, we'll help, but the more tools that we can get for you, the better off everybody's going to be. I mean, it just goes back to a plug for Ed Services, right? They are listening to and looking at the times of shorter videos and content being created and getting it out there and easily accessible. We're a state agency, so we're limited on funding a lot. We don't have a lot of the accessibility right now with AI chatbots and instant messaging on that and getting instant answers. So we have to work with what we have for now, constantly moving forward. But the Ed Services team has been dynamic in making these shorter video content, so you don't have to go and watch the ER workshop from last year and listen to me for 3 hours. You can watch these little tidbits of information. So plug for the manual. Before you ask us a question, just look it up real quick, see if you can find your answer. If you can't, let us know that. Okay, so sometimes for those of you that have heard me speak a few times, I reiterate a lot. I say some of the same things, and that's okay. I'm okay with that because I think these things are really important. I say all the time that we're speaking two different languages, right? The employer has their language for how it works for their school. So, for instance, let's say we have school X that calls Sally a substitute, but Sally just comes in and fills in for vacant, fills in for people, does an extra task here and there, but she's coded as a substitute. There's no NPERS taken out. However, we all know, and we've hit this a lot in the past, we won't hit substitutes much this year. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal this year, and I'll tell you why later. But for retirement purposes, substitute is very specific. It has a definition in statute that tells us exactly what substitute is. So if we are talking substitute for retirement purposes, we're talking something specific. So I just want to get us on the same page for this presentation and for the polls and the scenarios that we're going to be going over today. A lot of the scenarios will say things like, so-and-so is retired or they terminated. But when we are looking at NPERS, when we're looking at eligibility or termination of employment rules, we need to know, did they take a distribution? Okay, so if you say things that you think we're on the same page as far as retired or terminated, we have to make sure we're talking about, are we talking about someone that took a distribution or not? Typically, when employers say so-and-so retired, they're thinking of someone that was retirement age that took their benefit. And then typically we hear terminated for a younger member that left, and there's no assumption that a distribution has been taken. I should have got the numbers, but I think everyone would be quite surprised with the amount of people that leave employment from a school plan employer and take a refund or a rollover when they're nowhere near retirement age, or maybe even retirement age. But I don't want us to forget that just because someone is not retirement age, that it doesn't mean they're not taking a distribution, because they can still take a distribution. And just because someone is retirement age doesn't mean they're taking their benefit right away. Sometimes people wait for a significant birthday to hit rule of 85 or something, right? But we don't always know that. So in scenarios when we say retired or terminated, the focus for NPERS in answering questions is going to be, did they take a distribution? And then just remembering that distribution could be any of those things, right? Annuity, benefit, refund, rollover. The next thing would be full-time, part-time. A lot of times when we hear scenarios, it's, hey, this full-time person or this part-time person, but there's no full-time, part-time for school plan. For us, we're going to be talking about hours. What are the number of hours they're working? That's where we're going to worry about eligibility. So if you say part-time, what are we going to want to know? Well, we're going to want to know, is the intention at least 20 hours or not? Because just because someone is or is not eligible for other benefits that you as the employer offer, i.e. health insurance or vacation or anything else, that has no bearing on if they are eligible for retirement. So the two are separate and distinct. So we need to focus on, instead of full-time, part-time, we need to focus on what are the hours that they will be working. And then I think there's been a lot of confusion on, you will hear NPERS say, did they terminate the regular position? And I think sometimes people hear the word terminate and they're like, well, they didn't terminate. They just separated, or they not separated, they transferred positions without a separation. And what we need you to hear, that when we say, did they terminate regular employment, is we're not asking, did they terminate employment from your employer? We're asking, did they terminate regular service? Did they terminate as a regular position? So in other words, were they a para that was a regular para in a regular position for 10 years? Did they stop being a para because now they know they can make more money being a sub, and so they've terminated the para regular employee position, and now they're in a substitute employee position? So when you hear the word terminate from us, don't get caught up in the, well, they didn't terminate from the employer, right? We are talking about one employee classification to another. And when we talk about retirement employee classification, we're talking about regular, substitute, or temporary. And if you've heard me talk before, you hear me talk about buckets, and we're going to be talking about buckets again today. I just try to break it down to where my brain is like, okay, here is the easiest that I can understand this. And we have a regular bucket and a temporary bucket and a substitute bucket. You physically cannot be in two buckets at one time. Statute classifies them and defines them as regular employee, substitute employee, temporary employee. So that's the employee you are, okay? All right, we'll get into that further later. I know that you cannot see the words on the screen. They're really tiny, and that's okay. That's not what this screen is for. This screen is simply just saying, these are all of the questions that were asked in the survey, 1 to 5, 1 being the easiest to understand and 5 being the hardest to comply with. It looks like that's cut off there. So the things, as I was looking at these and getting an average on where everyone landed on these, what I thought was interesting is that none of them even got to a 3, right? So 3, again, we talk about that middle ground where it's like I don't know if I understand this necessarily. I'm not on a 4. I'm not going to commit to this being hard, but I'm not at a 2. I'm not going to commit to this being easy. So I don't know. None of them even reached a 3. So what I did was then instead, I looked across the board and went, okay, which ones hit 2.5 or above? So I think the averages were 2.5 to 2.9. So those are the ones with the arrows. That's establishing eligibility upon rehire, extra duty wages and hours, eligible service credit, tracking hours, reportable compensation, citizenship, immigration eligibility, and making corrections and adjustments. And the making corrections and adjustments is the only one that even reached 2.9. So that was the highest one. Okay, so the first thing, zooming in here now that you can actually read words, is establishing eligibility upon rehire. Now, another thing that I thought was interesting. I mean, okay, I'm an auditor, right? So numbers are my thing, and statistical data, and looking at that, and you can see it clearly in the chart. The difference between establishing eligibility upon hire and establishing eligibility upon rehire is very clear. I mean, when people submitted this, they were like, oh, upon hire, yeah, I got it. I understand the buckets and the hours. I got it. Regular employee, intent to work 20 hours or more, and we're gonna, the 18 years or older, and lawfully present. I got that. But when they come back now, for some reason, it's super confusing. So let's go over that. My goal at the end of today, if nothing else, is that you understand the difference between the two is not a lot. It's not a lot. There's two significant differences between establishing eligibility upon hire and establishing eligibility upon rehire. So if people could go to the chat and just take a guess. We have Stacy, thank you. Classification and hours worked a week. Heather, if they took a withdrawal of their funds, perfect. Have they taken a distribution? Perfect. We have distribution on there a lot. Were they previously eligible and contributing? Did they take a distribution? And if so, did they have a bona fide break? This is amazing. This is great. This is all correct. So for those that answered, thank you so much for just having the courage to stick your neck out there and put an answer in the chat. That is the difference, right? So if they're substitute or temporary, that's not a difference, because if it's upon hire or if it's upon rehire, those classifications are not eligible, right? And we can figure this out and find this information really easy by getting out your eligibility checklist. So it's exactly what we said. It's exactly what everybody in the chat said. Regular employee, right? That's the kicker. Not temporary, not substitute. So regular employee and at least 18 years of age and lawfully present. Just for future in the presentation too, as we get into the nitty gritty about eligibility or scenarios or something, let's just across the line imagine that every single scenario, they are 18 years of age and they're lawfully present, okay? I don't want that to trip anybody up. We're not even going to ask that question. So any scenario that we're doing, we're going to assume 18 years of age or lawfully present. So then the next questions are, have they established eligibility with your school or ESU previously? And if they've never taken a distribution, then participation is mandatory, regardless of intention of hours. And let's show you on that eligibility checklist. If you're not, John put it in there, and so did Aaron. Thanks so much. So click on the link if you want, but it is also here. I do think you get more out of the interaction if you actually have it and you're looking and you can see it, see what the entire thing looks like too. But so those first two questions, 18 years of age or lawfully present. Oh, yay. Checklist has been super helpful. That's amazing. Then we go through 3, right? So we established substitute, nope, temporary, nope. So those are all the things that we establish eligibility upon hire, right? Then the next questions are going to pull us over to the rehire. So have they ever taken a distribution? Yes. If yes, are they within their 120 days? So that's that kicker. And if it's a no, then it takes it down to, was this person previously employed at your school or ESU and participating? And if they were, then it's mandatory. So it doesn't matter if Sally was a 10-year para, full-time contributing, took 2 years off, didn't take a distribution. She comes back to do 1 day a week para. I don't know, because that's what she wants to do. The 1 day she's contributing on that 1 day if she's in the regular bucket, right? The other thing that I want to reiterate here too, and it's not necessarily a question that came up in the survey, but it is something that I just like to refresh everybody on, is what you have is a multiple employer plan. So for those of you that don't know, there's 265 school plan employers. Upon eligibility, we are only concerned with you, one, your employer, okay? They have to establish eligibility with you. And that rule has not changed for a really long time. Way, 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 way back in the day, it used to be different, but currently, and for a really long time, it has been you establish eligibility at your school. On the other end, and we're talking about termination, now we're talking about every school. We need to make sure that there's no service at any school. So that's why the questions on the eligibility checklist are written like that. Because the first thing we have to do, and somebody hit it in the chat too, was that we have to make sure we're not getting a term violation, because those are life-changing experiences. And if your school has had one of those, I'm sorry. It is just as hard for us. I mean, people are having to pay back tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars because they have a term violation. So the eligibility checklist is set up to help you answer those questions and deal with the termination piece, but then also just establishing that eligibility. Okay, here's what I was talking about when I said the red boxes. And I can see the red, it's not so bright even here on the webinar, but the red boxes are what I simply copied and pasted. So people were saying, I need a clear explanation checklist of rules and eligibility. I want a one-page checklist of steps to complete when enrolling a new member. And I want something that talks about the common pitfalls and how to avoid them. Man, that's your eligibility checklist. Just like the person on the chat said, it's been so helpful for them. I'm so glad to hear that. That's your one-stop shop. And don't print it out and print a bunch of them and then just use from your stack, because we update those. So get on the link and click on the fillable PDF, fill it out, and then print it, right? Or that day, if you're a paper person, I like to read paper books. I'm a paper person. If you do that, then just print it off that day. Don't have a stack of them, but that is going to be updated. That will take care of almost probably 80% of the common pitfalls and how to avoid them is using this. Now, it's not mandatory, okay? So if you don't want to use it, you don't have to. It's not a requirement to get into retirement. Again, mandatory, right? So if you meet the eligibility requirements, you're in. There's no voluntary in this plan. But it is a tool. It does walk you through the different scenarios. It will get you to the answer. And if there's something on there that's confusing, we are the ones that change it. So just let us know. And we can update that anytime. The other thing was information to give employees on where to begin. And Sammy hit this. Both of these things are on our website. She went over this, the school new member packet. So I won't live here for long, but just know, again, mandatory, 0 enrollment forms, but this will give your members everything they need. And quite frankly, if I were in your job, I would send the new member, an onboarding email, tell them a little bit about, hey, I really think you should check out what an amazing retirement plan you have. I think that would be great. And here's this link, and it's going to give them the handbook and the beneficiary form and the vesting credit form. We've heard lately that some schools require your position to take in those Benny forms and the vesting credit forms, and you would be the one to turn it in, and then you keep a copy. I just want to be clear that nobody but the member should know who's on that beneficiary form. And so that's between the member and NPERS. So you all have enough to do. I mean, there is already so many processes and paperwork and whatever. From NPERS, we're telling you, like, the requirement is you shall give them this, right? But once you send that, and the link is probably the best way to go because we will update it electronically. So once you've done that, though, you've checked that box. That part is done. When you go to the website right now, the eligibility checklist is in two places. It's in one place, but there's two different eligibility checklists. And you can see it clearly gives the dates on them. 5/1 to 2026 to 10/28/2026, you use that one. And then from 10/29/26 beyond, you use the other one. And at that point in time, we will take down the 5/21/26 to 10/28/26 one. The reason for this is that you currently could have members either within their 180-day separation period or a 120-day separation period because of the statute change that it was from May 1 on. If somebody termed in April, right, or let me be clear, if their separation period started before April, then they would be in the 180 days. So the rules have not changed. Your separation period beginning date, okay? So the rules now are 120 days beginning the later of termination date or NPERS receipt of a valid distribution application. That component did not change from the last 180, okay? So you could have someone in either group, but that's the start of your separation period. However, because of when the statute took place until the end of October, you technically could have two groups of separation periods. And we will get into that more later, and I'll show you where to look for a lot of details on that. That also was talked about in the LB 824 webinar as well. So do we not need to turn in the beneficiary form for the employee? My current process is notarizing the form for the employee, making a copy and mailing. No, you don't have to turn it in. You have to give it to them. Now, if your school says this is part of your job and you need to do that, I mean, then okay, do it. But you shouldn't have a copy of it either. So the Benny form is between the member and NPERS. When I talked about the differences that changed on the eligibility checklist based on feedback, I'm just going to point them out to you right here. And I want you to see in real life, you know, we do take your feedback. It helps us if the tools we give you helps you, because then we can all just get more done. If you have a tool that can give you exactly what you need and you understand it, there's less back and forth for both of us. So Aaron's doing the new member review. And within the new member review, he's seen a lot of these eligibility checklists, and he's seen where some of maybe the biggest obstacles are in establishing eligibility based on documentation. So he said, hey, it'd be really nice if the eligibility checklist had employee classification and intention of hours to be worked. So they do. You'll see that yellow highlighted right there. It's right at the top. So you can put that right there. We had feedback from a couple of employers, and we're also caught in reviews that we did that they found it hard to understand when to stop. So, you know, like we talked about, we live and breathe retirement, and we know what we're talking about. And we think we understand, we, you know, provide guidance perfectly well. We had a lot of employers that just kept going. And so they'd fill out the eligibility checklist, but they just kept going till the very last question. And it's actually set up so that it dependent upon how you answer it, there's lots of different places in that eligibility checklist that you'll stop. So now you can see those red dots on there. Now it's like a stop sign and it says stop here. And so it tells you, depending upon how you answer, if you answer one way, like, is the person 18 years or older? Nope, they're not eligible. Stop here. Reassess eligibility when they're 18. So hopefully you see that we're taking your feedback. We truly do want these tools to work best for you. It works better for everybody if they do. I want to address one of the biggest feedback that I had as well, and you may not like the answer, and that's okay. Feedback, and I just put one of these on here, but there was survey results from last year, and it was on this survey this year. So they just want to know what the answers are. So last year we went over a lot of scenarios. This year we're going to go over a lot of scenarios, and people want to know what the answers are, and I don't have them in the PowerPoint, and they didn't write them down, and I'm not going to give you the answers. There's some things that maybe you can write down that's like, oh yes, this or that, and there's some slides that I tried to just put way more information on the slide so you could see where it came from. You could see the statute and the foundational component to it. But a lot of the things are just going to depend on your facts and circumstances. And you're going to see that coming up on the next slide and with the next poll questions that we have going on here. So depending upon how we take the scenario, whether somebody had a distribution or not, whether they met the intention of hours or not, whether their service is considered a regular employee or a temporary employee, like, that's going to be dependent upon what the answer is. So for those of you that are wanting answers, they want PowerPoint provided with answers, or they want them written down. This is what I would tell you. Use your eligibility checklist. So don't go back to the examples to be like, I need a concrete answer for this, because you change just one thing in facts or circumstances and it changes the answer. So the biggest takeaway I want you to have is to use the eligibility checklist, use the manual, use the tools that are available to you, eligibility checklist for sure, to get you to what your answer would be. So I know that's probably not the answer that everybody wants, but that's the reason some of those answers aren't there. So all right, we're going to have a poll question pop up in just a second here. What we did was took real life documentation that we received throughout, and we wanted you all to see what it was. And we want to figure out, can we establish eligibility based on the documentation that we're going to show up on the screen, okay? So we talked about the difference between hire and rehire and how everybody's like, rehire is really hard. I mean, except you all hit it on the chat. Like every single one of you knew exactly what the difference was. So that's great. And for those of you that didn't know, hopefully, you know, that sinks in too, because I think it was written on there probably 30 times. So for this one, we're looking at an at-will classified employee worksheet with a summary of their duties and hours. And it talks about it's a school para, maximum of 37 weeks in a year. And then it talks about hours a week is a maximum of 40 hours a week. And the hours per day would be a maximum of 8 hours per day. So for those of you that say no, let's just use the chat for now. Go ahead and put a reason why you say no. For somebody that said no, put in the chat why you said no. And somebody that said maybe, tell us why you said maybe. I don't think we had anybody say yes. So give us a reason. What are the minimum hours? Oh, there we go. There are no minimum hours. Look at that. Depends on hours. Okay, perfect. So max of 40 does not mean there's a minimum. Man, that's great. That is so great. That's what I wanted you to get away from this. This talks about what they could work, but it doesn't prove the 20 hours per week. Not enough information. Maybe depends on hours actually worked, depends on hours. Age, citizenship, hours. I don't know this person. I wouldn't. Perfect. Okay, so the age, citizenship, hours, I gotcha. Just reminder, for every single scenario we're going to get, just imagine we're just going to pretend they are 18 and they are lawfully present. But you're right. Those are absolutely things we need to look at. So this one says maximum of 80 hours a week, right? So no, we don't have the intention. Okay, we're gonna try the poll question again. So does the employment agreement on the next slide establish eligibility? So we're looking at a non-certificated employment agreement. And it says the term of the employment is this contract shall commence on July 1 and shall terminate on June 30th, or when it is terminated at will. And then it talks about at no point shall the employee work no more than 37 and a half hours per week. But you're exactly right. This says at no point shall the employee work no more than 37 and a half hours. There's a double negative that some people have pointed out that it kind of trips them up a little bit, but the no more than 37 and a half, that's not establishing our minimum, is it? We had some other people in the workshops point out the terms of employment and the 1 year from July to June. And so that maybe tripped people up. It's 1 year or less is what that terms of employment was there. However, with the school plan, we do have that continuing contract clause, right? And so a lot of times the contracts are contingent to that continuing contract clause, and service is not terminated with the end of a contract. And we'll get into that later. But for this one, if we're just looking at the hours, it doesn't give us the minimum hours. So for this one, a lot of you hit it right. You wouldn't put them in right away, and you would try if we determine this is regular and not temporary based on the 1 year, you're going to track the hours and then put them in only contingent upon what their hours look like, right? If they hit the average of 20 hours a week and any 3 calendar months of the plan year, which is July to June, those months don't they don't have to be consecutive. So anytime in those 3 months. All right, let's look at another one again. So here we have classified staff as a reassignment from a substitute driver to a regular route driver, and the hours per day were 2.5 to 4 at $22 an hour back in 2023. Jill, no. Yeah, you bet. So if we're talking about establishing eligibility upon hire, right, they don't meet that minimum threshold. That's 2.5 to 4. How do we know what their minimum's going to be? They could work 2.5, 5 days a week. And does that hit 20? Nope. Now, if they do work 4, 5 days a week, that hits 20, but we need to know what the intention is. So new hire, we're not asking for a crystal ball. We don't need you to know what they're actually going to work, but we at least have to know what the intention is for those minimum number of hours. So here gives you a range, and the lowest of the range does not hit the 20. So you're right, Cassie, it would exactly be tracking hours. You wouldn't put them in upon hire, and you would track their hours. And then if they meet the average of 20, then you'd put them in. You bet. Thanks, everybody, for participating. All right, we're going to look at another one here, personnel action form on the next slide. If this is filled out correctly, would this meet eligibility? So I hope you can see that okay on your screen. So the things I highlighted to kind of help, I thought it helped me try to establish is they initially tell you right there if it's a vacant position. And so we know that it's not a substitute if they put that it's a vacant position, right? And then it clearly makes you delineate between regular or temporary. So you put in there, and so if they mark temporary, then they wouldn't have established eligibility. And then it says total hours per week. And see if this is filled out correctly, you're going to know if it's regular or temporary. They don't have substitute on here, but they do have the total hours per week. So if you have somebody that has that regular box checked, and then they have that 20 hours per week on there, or 40 hours per week, as long as it's not a maximum of or a minimum of, or a range where the lower end of that range doesn't meet the minimum. So we can move forward on that one too, but that just shows you something different, that the more you have on the form too, where it's the boxes to actually check to support that eligibility. Okay, so sometimes in audit we see emails, as form of communication. And I hear more and more that, we are not in charge of what these forms look like. And I try to say that we need this information and nobody gives it to me. And how are we supposed to be able to establish eligibility? Well, somebody sent us an email. And so this reporting agent, then if they don't have the documentation they need, you can send an email that clearly says, okay, here's this individual is going to be working, and send that, or add notes to the document. But here's an email that I wanted everybody to see. And we'll try the poll this time. So this is a pay sheet back in 2024 that says, can I get a pay sheet for Lisa Kitchen by tomorrow morning? She's coming in at 10 a.m. and will be working 3 days a week, I think, 22 and a half hours. We got 3 that said no, 1 that said maybe in the poll, but then everybody else is starting to say no. Jennifer, this is what some other people picked up on in the other workshop. So Jennifer says no, the I think comment does not guarantee what her hours and days will be, and somebody liked that. That's where everybody else really focused on, was the I think. So she does, right, put in a specific number of hours for the week, but this, I think, just helps us to, and Cassie, where the schedule is, I think I would track hours and then go from there. Yeah. So if this person truly, and I go both ways, right? If this reporting agent was like, this is 22 and a half hours week person, just be cognizant of the words that you put into the email, knowing if you're using this for eligibility purposes. Right, because someone could say, well, the I think maybe skews us towards not the hours. So that's great. You guys picked up on exactly what everybody else did. Yeah, but just an example that if you need to establish eligibility outside of the actual document that you have, emails work. Additional notes on that documentation works as well. Okay, so the next poll question, does a classified hire form establish eligibility? So this one's obviously not filled out, but if it's filled out correctly, we've got hours a day, how many hours a day, how many days in the year, and it talks about a transfer, current assignment, new assignment, how many hours a day. No, we need hours in a week and not in a day. Perfect. This isn't giving us a week, right? So let's not do the poll on this next one, John. Let's just talk this through. So both documents were sent in to establish eligibility together. So what happens when we put these 2 documents together? So it looks like everybody was saying we need hours a week and not in a day. So now we get a little bit further on. So here's our offer of employment. We have the position, and then what is the actual schedule? That tells us how many days in a week, right? And then how many hours of work. And if you put down then, 20 or 30/week, that would tell us, that would help. All right. So the next question that came up on the survey was more examples of real life situations, like what is temporary staff position? So on your slide, this is when I say that you're going to start to get more information on the slides to maybe take back. So you have the statute on the slide for you, but the takeaway on what temporary is it is not a regular employee, right? They're hired on for a limited period of time, not to exceed 1 year, so 1 year or less, to accomplish a task, and when the task is over, the employment ends. So John is hired after the school year to paint all the bathrooms. The expectation is that all bathrooms will be complete before the start of the next school year. So what details help confirm this is a temporary employee? Well, we have that John was hired to paint the bathrooms at the end of the school year, and it should be done before the next school year, right? So that's over the summer. So that's 1 year or less. That would be temporary position, be a temporary employee. Now, what details could change the classification from temporary employee to regular employee? Well, what if John is a teacher? What if John paints the bathrooms every single summer? right? So if John is otherwise employed as a regular employee, like a teacher, and then over the bathroom, he's just painting the bathrooms, then John is a regular employee. We know he was a teacher last year. We know that employment continues next year. So now he's a regular employee. So the summer might be temporary service, but he's a regular employee. So it would be pensionable. Now, if John just paints the bathrooms every summer and he does it summer after summer after summer, now we know that he's a regular employee, because at that point it's almost a seasonal position, right? And so now the statutes say seasonal suspension does not terminate service. So if this is his job, those are the things that could change it, right? So when we're talking about temporary, we're just talking about 1 year or less, they come in to complete a job, and when the job is done, their employment terminates. And it really comes down to, what does your documentation look like? These are your buckets, and we talked about them before. Here's what they are. We have temporary, substitute, and regular. Your temporary and substitute are ineligible, right? Regular employee is the only employment that is pensionable. Every substitute is a temporary employee, but not every temporary employee is a substitute. So the difference then is substitute is just narrowly defined in statute. So it's just you're a temporary employee, that's who you are. However, you're coming in just to fill in for somebody that's temporarily absent. So different scenario. Sarah is hired as a community coach for volleyball and will only work 3 months during the season. What details help confirm this is temporary employment? And we won't do chatter pull on this one either. Community coach, I had the question on, well, what is a community coach? When we hear community coach, most of the time, it means that it's not a teacher. It's not a para. It's not somebody that's already hired as an employee at your school, and the only service they provide is a coach. So they come from the community. They're not an actual employee in any other way other than this coaching position, okay? So if they come in and they work, and the key word is only work 3 months during the summer, they're only doing it 1 summer, then it confirms it's a temporary employee, right? That's the 1 year or less, not a regular employee. They come in to do the volleyball coaching and then they're done. Now, again, kind of like the bathrooms, if they come in and they do it every single season, well, that's ongoing. And statute clearly says that service is not deemed interrupted by temporary or seasonal suspension. Again, we touched on this earlier. It is also not deemed interrupted by termination at the end of a contract if they enter another contract the following year. So that's your continuing contract clause. Okay, so that gets tricky. So we've had questions about, okay, so if somebody has a contract and it's a 1 year contract, I mean, all of our teachers have 1 year contracts. Yep, that continuing contract clause. Statute says you're a regular employee, okay? What does it look like if somebody that has a contract or has a work agreement for 1 year, how do we get out of that? What do we need to say, and what does our documentation look like to truly establish temporary service? Because you'll hear that from me over and over again. You'll hear that from NPERS over and over again. If they are temporary, if they are substitute, what documentation do you have to support it? So Susan was hired to fill a math teacher position, but her documentation states this position is temporary. In fact, like in the heading, it says temporary 1 year contract. The timeline, 1 school year. There's a termination date at the end of the school year. Now, again, most contracts have those 2 things, 2 and 3, right? But this clearly says there is no continuing contract clause. In fact, Susan already submitted her resignation letter when she signed the work agreement or the contract. As she said, I am done. I will help you out for 1 year, but I am done. So here's my resignation letter. There is no intention of me coming back in the next year. Susan is done, right? So what does your documentation say? That's what we're going to focus on. The next question was, I get so confused on rehires. And now what if they're part-time in our district and another district? What if they retired from one school and they are coming here? How am I supposed to keep track of all those things when the rules are constantly changing? Okay, I hear you. I hear you. Number one, again, it's a multiple employer plan, but when you're establishing eligibility, it's per school plan employer. Okay, so if you are establishing if they go in the plan or not, we're not concerned if they're contributing or not contributing elsewhere. However, on the other side of that, with the multiple employer plan, the termination rules apply for all school plan employers. So if this person is in the middle of their 120 days, that could cause an issue for them, right? But to answer this, again, what are the questions that we need? So what is part-time? NPERS needs to know, are we talking about somebody that is the intention of 20 hours or more? Are we talking about somebody that's less than? What does retired mean? When you say retired, were they just old enough to take a benefit? They meet the age requirements, but are they actually taking a distribution? What does retired mean? Were they contributing before at your school? Because that makes a difference. And again, we're always in all of these situations. We're going to assume they're 18 and lawfully present. And then how long is a position? Is this a regular position? Is this a temporary position? Are they filling in for somebody who's a regular employee that's temporarily absent? Because if they are, what would that be? Substitute, right? So we have to know all of these things in order to answer the question. So this one I couldn't really answer, but what I want to tell you and just redirect you back to is the eligibility checklist. 1 and 2, we're just making those assumptions, right? If they're 18, lawfully present. Okay. So based on the information that I had, I'm going to assume that they're not a substitute. I'm going to assume they're not temporary. And then have they taken a distribution? Let's say yes. So they have. So then that tells us to proceed to 6. Has the individual satisfied the 120-day separation period? Let's say they have. Okay. And then that takes us to question 8. So then will the person be working at your school district for 20 hours or more per week? The question said part-time. I'm going to assume that's not 20. So then that takes us to not eligible, and now we track hours. So even though I can't provide answers to some of those things, like I get it, maybe I can send out something in the aftermath that says, hey, for these scenarios, these would be no, because we don't have minimum of intention of hours. I'll do that for sure. But some of these are just a little harder. But what I would like to do, rather than just giving an answer on this, is to lead you back to the tools. Depending on how you answer the questions is going to be what your answer is dependent on. This I show because I thought this was great. We received this in a review and I looked at it and went, wow, this reporting agent, they say it so well, it's clear and concise, and I can tell like they just understand the rules. So just to give some background for this, Aaron is a former contributing member with the school, and they're trying to determine, how much he's going to work. Is he going to be in a regular position or not? Before we read the email, note the year, 2024. So we have different termination of employment rules. So don't take away from this that this is the termination of employment rules right now, currently. But so the business manager says, Ryan, if Aaron does not take a distribution from his retirement account at NPERS, he can drive a regular bus route daily for us, and he'll have to contribute to retirement with that pay. If he's a substitute driver, though, then he would not contribute to retirement. So we're clearly saying if he's in a regular position, because he was already a former contributing member at their school, right? Then we're not even talking about hours. He can drive a regular bus route, and he will he will contribute. But if he's a substitute, that's ineligible. He's not going to contribute. And then we pull in the distribution piece. So this is that rehire. This is trying to really narrow down and hone in on the difference in people saying, oof, rehire was really hard, but hire was super easy peasy. So then she goes into, well, if he does plan to take a distribution, then he'll have to comply with the termination of employment rules. So it's not as flexible if he's taking a distribution. And P.S., it's really not flexible now, right? So she's talking about the 8 days with of substitute or volunteer service that they would have been allowed in the separation period before in the 180 days. But now with the 120 days, there's no flexibility. So we got to know when establishing eligibility, did they take a distribution? Did they already contribute at our school, right? Okay. The next one was someone that was frustrated after a new member audit, and they felt like they had heard something from us in workshops that was very then different for the findings that they had in the audit. So this comes up a lot. So we just want to address this. On the new hire audit, we had the finding that we shouldn't have enrolled a couple of staff who were hired to work over 20 hours, but they ended up resigning or getting fired that same month they started. My understanding from these workshops is that it's based on the intention upon hire, and the intention was to work over 20 hours a week. And therefore, they're eligible and qualified. It's just confusing that we were told we shouldn't have. I think there needs to be more guidance in going over this. Okay, so you're correct. You need to base retirement eligibility on intention. We do not expect you to have a crystal ball. The eligibility checklist says, is the intention to work 20 hours? Yes. Okay, let's go to statute. The yellow highlighted there says therein if it's an ongoing basis for 20 or more hours per week. Well, if we know within the first month, before we remit any contributions, that they will not be working on an ongoing basis for 20 or more hours a week, then it's reasonable that they never participate in the plan. We already know that. If you contributed on them already, they're in, right? They're in. You did what you needed to do. But if you've never even remitted contributions, then it's reasonable that you don't. You already know they're not going to be regular and ongoing. The next part of that I highlighted in green was, what about a part-time employee who qualifies for working over 20 hours, 3 months in a year? So that's that, just to clarify. If you don't put somebody in immediately upon hire, then you track hours and you put them in if they hit an average of 20 hours in any 3 calendar months of the fiscal year to July to June, right? And then they say this is close to the end of the year and they resign at the end of the year. Should they be enrolled or not? So we go back to statute. And it says if you have somebody in that situation, they shall, beginning with the next full payroll period, commence contributions and shall be deemed a regular employee. So if you have a regular employee that meets the hours threshold for mandatory enrollment, they must begin the contributions on the next payroll period. Okay, so question to the group. What happens if you hired a regular employee, at least 18 years old, lawfully present, remember, we don't need to worry about those, to work at least 20 hours a week, and they end up working less than 20 hours a week? All right, participation again. In the chat, start to throw out what happens. You hire them. The intention is that they work 20 hours a week, so you enroll them, but they never work 20 hours a week. What do you do? Okay, here's the deal. This goes back to exactly what that person was saying. I feel like at these workshops, you tell us it's the intention and we don't ever have to worry about it, and then we put them in. If you hire them with the intention to work 20 hours a week, again, we don't expect you to have a crystal ball. You put them in. You put them in. If they end up working less than 20 hours a week, they were in correctly because you had the intention of working 20 hours a week. Now, before you ever remit contributions, if you hire them at 20 minimum of 20 hours a week. And then all of a sudden, like week 2, they're like, no, this is too much. I'm only going to give you 10 hours. You already know before you remit contributions, it's less than, that's fine. But once they're in, it doesn't matter what their hours do. Same goes for if you hire somebody at 40 hours and they do 2 months at 40 hours and then they go down to 15, right? They're in. So hopefully that's easier for everybody. No adjustments. Nobody likes adjustments. Okay, bus drivers or part-time employees, if they qualified to have contributions started in the 25 to 26 school year, the next year, do you stop contributions to track hours again to see if they're eligible? So what do you think? Just a simple yes or no in the chat. They've qualified, you started contributions, the next year, do you have to track again for eligibility purposes? We've got a bunch of no's. We've got I don't see anything else besides no. Thank you. You're correct. Once they are in and they continue regular employment, then contributions continue. The only difference would be if the bus driver terminates their regular position and then they change and do something else as a temporary or substitute. And then contributions would stop. But it doesn't matter. Once you've established eligibility, you still track, right? Because we need to figure out service credit, but you don't have to reestablish eligibility. So when can contributions stop? When can they stop? Well, I just said it. If you have a regular employee that's changing classifications to a substitute or a temporary employee, then they stop. Or if they terminate altogether, then they stop. We go back to that, let's speak the same language, right? So everybody, again, I think they get caught up in that word terminate, and they're thinking, well, they didn't terminate from us. They just changed positions. So did they terminate one classification and change to another classification? Did they change from a para to a substitute? Well, then as a para, you're contributing because that's regular service, as long as it's 1 year, over 1 year, right? But now that they're a substitute employee, then contributions would stop. It just goes back to our buckets. When an established, this is what people wanted to know. When an established eligible employee moves to a temporary position without termination, this is a transfer. No separation, but went from teaching to subbing. So use the eligibility checklist. When someone changes classifications, use the eligibility checklist. They've terminated one position and you're hiring them into another. So that eligibility checklist talks about hire, rehire, but that's what's going on. Don't get caught up in semantics on termination and rehire, and we're thinking termination from employment and rehire as an employee. Think about it in terms of retirement when we're speaking retirement and they're terminating regular service and they're being rehired or changing to moving employee classifications, right? Because again, you physically cannot be in 2 buckets at one time. So if I'm a regular employee, like statute says, this is the bucket I'm in. If I no longer am a regular employee and now I change and now I'm in the substitute bucket, I'm an ineligible employee. So that's when contributions would stop. So as long as all regular service has terminated, they would be classified as an ineligible employee. This also means, though, that they cannot maintain a coaching position or in any other regular extra duty position that they've had and stop contributions. So you have a teacher who's your volleyball coach and they terminate the teaching position, but they continue the coaching position. Well, then they're still a regular employee. They're still in that regular bucket. They only termed one of the regular positions. They're still a regular employee. And just get out your eligibility checklist. So let's look at it. The first 2 we're not going to go over. So are you then, as the person being hired, rehired as a substitute? Yes. Is the person changing classifications to a substitute? And maybe that's what we can do to help with this eligibility checklist is put another slash on there. Is the person being hired, rehired, or changing classifications solely as a substitute, right? And if that's the case, substitutes are not eligible. Stop here. Tells you that. Or if they go to the temporary. So are they being hired as a substitute? No. Are they being hired, rehired, or changing classifications to temporary? Well, then stop. They're not eligible. Can't be in it. We have a teacher that worked for one school year, then resigned. His contract is going to be sub until she has her baby next year. I will not withhold retirement for her sub now. Correct. So they resigned from the teaching position. That's a perfect example. Heather, thank you for that. A teaching position. They resigned from that teaching position. They are no longer in that regular bucket. They are going to sub. Now they're a substitute employee, which is an ineligible position. So no contributions. And in addition, then a non-con, right? The non-cons are not just if somebody terminates or is on a leave of absence. The non-cons are supposed to be submitted within 20 days of no contributions with a reason why, right? So if you have somebody that's contributing and now they're changing to substitute status, a substitute employee, you're stopping contributions because they're no longer regular service, then you fill out that non-con as well. Okay, the next question that came up was, what constitutes a vacant position? So I think this question came up because of substitutes, and we've really been hitting substitutes hard with that 8 days of substitute or volunteer service. We really had to hit on what is a substitute. And a substitute was somebody that's filling in for a regular employee that is temporarily absent. It is not someone filling in for vacant positions. Again, let me reiterate, I don't think this is going to be a big deal next year. Now, I should knock on some wood here. You all seem to always come up with some scenarios that we never thought of, that we didn't know, and we think it's simple, and then all of a sudden you're going, yeah, you think it's simple, but here's this question. Help us with this. I really, truly, though, the termination of employment rules, now that we took substitute service out, we took any service out to include teammates, to include, volunteer, sub, nothing can be done. I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal. But to address this question, just think about it as this. Is the position filled? So what constitutes a vacant position? Is it filled? Do you have somebody hired for that position? Are they temporarily gone? Or is it an open position? There is no regular employee that is hired for that position. That's where the vacant piece comes in. Okay, moving forward on the next two, they both averaged out at 2.7. Again, I told you nothing even hit a 3. So extra duty wages and hours and eligible service credit. Poll question is coming up. If you have a coach whose only jobs, and just a reminder too, that question and answer component is really helpful. If you have questions to get that, and then the people that are charged with the Q&A, they can make sure every single question is being answered, and that way questions don't get lost in the chat as well. So feel free, do that. So, okay, back to the poll question. If you have a coach whose only jobs are coaching one sport every year and substitute teaching, what hours do you use to evaluate eligibility for the plan? We already have people in the chat. Thank you. Both, all hours. Poll question is up, and the answers are coaching, substitution hours, all hours, or none, because this is not an eligible employee. Is tracking hours to establish eligibility. Let's go back to the buckets. Once you are a regular employee, so you can only be in one bucket at a time, I am classified for retirement purposes as a regular employee. So all of my hours are added together to establish eligibility. Now, on the flip side of that, I'm already eligible and I'm already contributing as a regular employee. All of my hours are added together to report to retirement. So wages, hours are all reported, no matter what service you're rendering, once you're in that regular bucket. So once you're a regular employee, you use all hours to establish eligibility, and you use all hours for tracking and reporting. So would they be considered a regular employee? You have a coach, it's every year, right? So they are your coach. They're coming back every single year. Remember that service is not interrupted by seasonal suspension. So seasonal is not a classification for retirement purposes. That is not it. And in fact, statute says that if you're seasonal and you're coming back every single season, you're a regular employee, right? So yes, they would be considered a regular employee. And then you track hours for eligibility or to report. You have some statutes. I'm trying to look at the time. I'm going to try and rush through a couple of these. But if a regular employee meets the hour threshold for mandatory enrollment, they must begin. Here's your service definition statute again. Okay, moving forward. We struggle with getting hour logs timely for staff. What recommendations do you recommend in order to get these? Coaches and staff really dislike having to complete these forms. Okay, we do have an extra duty log that is on the website. It is not mandatory. We just tried to give a tool in case you don't have another tool. So that is there. Going back to spreading extra duty hours over 12 months in alignment with a teacher's contract, we have a lot of schools that require service for extra duties all throughout the year. And let's be honest, I mean, I have a daughter that's a teacher and a coach, and she does some type of coaching service all year long, right? So then it's reasonable. It's a stipend. It's not an hourly wage. You take the stipend divided by however many months they're performing the service, because hours and wages should be reported when worked and earned. So if they are providing the service all school year, or they are providing the service all year, then that is when wages and hours should be reported. Better system for hours logs. Again, we have that tool for you. There is that tool. Provide an information sheet to be shared for school employees at the start of the year on why it matters. So there are two PDFs in that email that I talked about, and we'll send those out again. We will link those within the website on this webinar as soon as it's up and up on the website for you to see. So those will all be linked in there. They were made in conjunction with legal to provide information for you on the hows and whys of tracking and reporting, and both sheets combined provide 3 different examples of why it matters. And the one I always go over when I have workshops is my real life scenario, that when I was auditing back in 2021 and I was giving the spiel about the importance of tracking and reporting hours, is that I had a reporting agent stop me and say, "Oh, no, we get it. Our volleyball coach passed away right after volleyball season, and she never tracked or reported her hours. And so now her beneficiary's lifetime benefit is affected because of that service credit." So just remember in your plan, 1,000 hours equals 1 year of service credit. Service credit is important for 2 reasons. When you receive, if you receive a benefit, your calculation partly is based on your service credit. And so you have to have accurate reporting of service credit in order to get the benefit that you deserve. No more, no less, right? But if you worked the hours, then you should be getting them. On the other flip side of that, service hours are important for eligibility. We have to know how many hours you're working. So for both things, for eligibility and then for your lifetime benefit, it really becomes important. And you'll see that in those examples. So use those sheets, send them out, whatever you need to do with those. If we need something else, let us know, but you have those tools now. Question asked, we have a para leaving her para position and starting a new job elsewhere. She will continue to coach cross country in the fall. Can I take NPERS from her coaching pay? So I'm going to change this to should you continue to take contributions from her coaching pay? And we kind of already went over this before. But John, can you get that poll up? So while you're doing that, Lindsay, if we give our coaches the logs to track and turn in their hours to us, but then they never do it, no matter how hard we try, is this up to the business manager to guess? No. So you have your 3 groups of people, and while people are filling out the poll, please do that or put it in the chat if you can't use the poll. You have your 3 groups of people. Those that are already going to be working 1,000 hours in their regular service, right? The onus is on you to tell them that they need to do it. That goes back to that volleyball coach, okay? We understand, end of the day, if they make it through the entire year, they're already going to get 1,000 hours. And so then it becomes immaterial, right? You don't get extra credit or extra service credit for any hours over 1,000. It's maxed out at 1,000 with 1 year. But if you're not tracking them throughout the year and reporting them, then if something happens, you're out of luck. I mean, some of these coaches would have enough just in the coaching season alone to get somebody that's only worked 500 hours up to a full year of service credit, right? So that's the importance. So the onus is on you to get the information out to them and give them the tool available, however you want the hours to be tracked and reported to you. But if we are talking about eligibility, or members that are less than 1,000 hours, then the onus is on the business managers or whoever is tasked with that, right? What we are hearing a lot now is that a lot of schools refuse to pay. If you don't turn in your hours, you don't get your stipend. So there's different ways to go about it, and whatever you all are comfortable with on that. But if we are determining eligibility needs hours worked. You can't determine eligibility without hours. So if we are talking non-contributing employees, they have to track hours. You have to track and monitor hours. If we are talking under 1,000 hour employees, their lifetime benefit could be gravely affected, materially affected, if we don't have hours tracked. So for those 2 groups, the onus is on the employer. For the one that they already meet 1,000 hours, give it to them. Keep that documentation, that email that you sent out, give them the tools. If they don't turn it in, they don't turn it in. Okay, going to the poll, we had a bunch of people say yes and maybe, and we had one person say no on the poll. So yes is the answer. If they are a regular employee, and we went over this a little bit in a scenario before. You have a regular employee, they're both a coach and a para, but they terminate their para position, but they're going to continue their regular coaching position. You must continue to take contributions out. And let's just show you the eligibility checklist. It walks us through, right? And this is just a good way to show you any type of situation, even if they're not transferring from, maybe they're leaving, and we walk down. Are they a sub? No. Are they temporary? No. Has this person taken a distribution? We're going to assume no, because if they're going to do paraposition at another school immediately, number one, they're prearranging that. They have that done. And we can't do that if we're terminating and taking a distribution. So then we skip down to number 7. Was this person previously employed at your school district? Yes. So they continue. All right, another poll question here. It's not going to be a poll question. Somebody wanted to know how others keep track of extra duty hours. So let's just open up the chat here. So shared Google spreadsheet, Google Doc. Each coach has a Google Doc sheet. Prior business manager developed a Google form. This is perfect. Time clock system. Online time clock. We use a time clock for all employees. They transfer jobs with, that's amazing, Marissa. Transfer jobs within the time clock. I send out a monthly email reminder with the extra duty log, and that's perfect. That's what you need to do, especially for those 1,000 hours plus. Using extra hours, sheet from teachers, then I track on a Google Sheet. Time clock, shared Google Sheets. We use our timekeeping system. Some other answers that we have heard, and again, maybe people don't want to put their names on there, that they estimate hours or they use a percentage of. Some people that we have seen have sticky notes, and they give us a Post-it note sheet. Lots of timekeepers use a Google Sheet for coaches. Other than that, we have time clocks and paper time sheets. We've had things turned in like paper calendars that just have the hours on there. For those that maybe don't want to answer and put their name to it, but we've heard them in the other workshops, and we've heard them for years, is that percentage of or estimation. And that's what we don't want, right? So we want to make sure, again, they get the retirement that they deserve, no more, no less. So it's not an estimation of, this is the hours that they worked. And I think it can be made easier. Here's the games, here's how long the practices are. Maybe we can do some of that, but we need the hours. So if they don't turn them in and they're the 1,000 hour over employee, then they don't turn them in. If something happens to them in the middle of the year, that's really going to stink. Thank you so much for those that contributed to that and helped out the person that just wanted to know how other people do it. Coaching is always a hot topic, right? And so, like I said, we sit around the table going over this manual, word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, and page by page. And I'm not kidding. And again, a lot of that comes back from the feedback from you all, and coaching is hard. And what we heard when this changed from 180 to 120, we heard a lot about, well, then coaching is not going to matter. Why does it matter if I come back and I coach in the next season? Now that's far surpassing the 120 days. 180, maybe it was a little closer to the 180, but it's far surpassing the 120. So look up the employer manual, then you'll actually be able to read these. You might be able to read them on your screen, depending on how big your screen is, or if your eyes are bad like me, maybe not, but they're in the manual, okay? It's going to talk about prearrangement, number one. If you are terminating and going to take a distribution, part of having a bona fide separation is that there's no prearrangement to return. If you maintain your employment as the volleyball coach, that is clear intent to return, right? The next season, you have to have a true and sincere separation, a true and sincere termination. But then over and beyond that, we've already talked about it, and you have the statute in your PowerPoint that just because it's seasonal suspension doesn't mean it terminates your employment. So don't use the 120 days as like a safe harbor to be able to come back and coach. Go back into your manual. This is where I'm gonna force the manual if you really want to read and see what this says, but there's 2 pages of it. So hopefully that can help people there. I think somebody had asked earlier too if it's on the website, the coaching documents, and they aren't on the website currently, but you should have them in email. If you didn't get them in email, let us know. But I also will be sending out just like a recap, a refresh on some questions that had come up that everybody wanted the answers to. And I'll highlight that intention of, again, the answers for that. And those will be attached there as well. So, is it true that NPERS should not be withheld on wages below the minimum wage? Yep, that is 100% true. So statute says that if service is under minimum wage, then it doesn't count. And if the service credit doesn't count, the wages are attached. I think this has come up a lot more because minimum wage is going up, right? And so people are starting to see like our $10 an hour ticket taking. I really need to speed this up. Our $10 an hour ticket taking is under Nebraska minimum wage threshold. And so then it's not pensionable. So no, we've had a lot of questions. Is it federal minimum wage or Nebraska? It is Nebraska. And we've had a lot of questions on, well, our coaching stipend, then if we divide that amongst the hours that they turn in, then it's below minimum wage. No, your coaching is a stipend. You're not paying them an hourly wage, right? Nebraska minimum wage is based on an hourly wage. Your coaching stipend is dependent upon the coaching service, not an hours service. So don't worry about that there. It's only if your documentation says an hourly wage and it's beneath that. The next two things are tracking hours and reportable compensation. I'm going to have to kind of flow through some of this a little faster. One of the things was I feel like long-term subs and temporary employees are becoming more prevalent. So tons of examples on these situations would be great. The problem is when we talk about different languages, and just a reminder that there's 265 school plan employers and everybody has their own definition for what they consider a long-term sub. I've seen 1 week as a long-term sub. I've seen a long-term sub as a year. I think typically a lot of times I see the 45 days. So same as a retired teacher that is rehired as a long-term sub for 45 days. Do you enroll them in NPERS? This, I think, is a pretty common situation. What I would tell you is to get out your eligibility checklist. So we're going to need questions like, what does retired mean, right? And did he take a distribution? Is he within his 100 or if it was back in the 180, is he within his 120-day separation period? Are you hiring him just for this? So in this case, we're going to assume, again, Sam is 18, lawfully present. We're going to assume that he was a contributing member and that he took his benefit distribution as a teacher. And we're going to say he came back after 120 days as a long-term sub. And so now he's in the substitute bucket. He's fulfilled his separation period. That is no longer a concern. And so no, you would not enroll him in NPERS. Krista was a full-time para for 10 years before realizing she can get paid more as a substitute teacher. So it's the middle of August and the 4th grade math teacher has to go on medical leave for the rest of the year. Krista terminates her para position at the end of August and starts as a long-term sub position at the beginning of September. Get out your eligibility checklist for this. What are the hints in this scenario that would help us? So long-term para for 10 years. So we know she was a regular contributing employee, right? She realized she can get paid more as a sub. So she leaves in August. She terminates her para position. So she's removing herself from the regular bucket. And now she's going to go fill in for the 4th grade math teacher who's on leave. So she's filling in for a regular employee that's temporarily absent. So now she's a sub. So do you contribute on Krista? No, that would be a case when contributions would stop. Community coach records hours using the log and has 3 qualifying months, March, April, and May. If they come back the next year, do you enroll them the next year? Once a regular contributor, always a regular contributor. So Kara, just to answer that while people are filling in the poll or putting their stuff in the chat, remember it's employee. So once they are in the regular employee bucket, you maintain contributions. If something happens where they terminate, transfer from the regular employee bucket to another bucket, so now they're a substitute employee or a temporary employee, that's when contributions would stop. The thing that could have made a difference on that scenario is if Krista as the para continued to be a para after 10 years for 1 day a week, but then did the substitute service for the other 4 days, then that means that she would continue her regular service. She would stay in the regular bucket, and then she would contribute on everything. But that's because she didn't leave her regular employee status. So I hope that helps there. Okay, so looking at the poll and the few people, we have 93 people on here and 5, 6, only 10 of you are responding. I'll have you know, in person, I wouldn't allow that, but that's okay. Yes is what people answered, and yes would be the answer. So we are talking about fiscal year, July to June, right? They don't have to be consecutive months, but they can be. But it doesn't matter that the next payroll period is in the next season. You enroll them in the next payroll period. And there's an eligibility calculator on our website that clearly, like, it tells you, hey, this met, this was a qualifying month, this was a qualifying month, and on the third qualifying month, it says, hey, this person goes in on the next full payroll period. So check that out. That's a great tool for you too. But let's change up the question and get another poll on here. So question to the group, if we change it and they had March, April, and July as qualifying months, then what? Do they go in the plan?
Yes,
this poll is deleted by the owner.
Vanessa,
Go ahead.
There's a question in the Q&A. Are you able to see that? It's regarding community coaches.
Sorry about that.
There's several questions with that, and maybe we can cover it here, or at least try to answer questions.
No, I just have chat, so I'm not trying to do 10 million things at one time. So Aaron, if you want to just ask those questions and we can go over them right here.
Yeah. So the first one was, it's under the same group. So how do we know that he or she will return the next year? And then the next one, also first year coach, who I don't know will coach next year. Then do we start contributions based on assumption? That's the first two. There's a third question in there, but if you want to cover those first two, then we can go into the third.
Yeah, let's cover those first two. So you have to establish which classification they go in. Okay, that's up to you. So that goes to the beginning when we were talking about documentation. Now, it's reasonable if you hire somebody, you don't know that they're going to come back the next year, or maybe it's just a 1 year and out. But the second you know that now they're going to do service for over a year, and that means multiple seasons or the next season, right? Now they're regular. So what can you do on your documentation to support or confirm? Because I know a lot of times you are not the ones that are answering the questions. I really want to be cognizant of people's time too, and there's 10 minutes left. So I'm going to try to go really fast. Aaron, hang on to that question. Maybe you can answer it in the question and answer. I do want to get through the PowerPoint. I don't know why this one ran so long. And for those of you that want to stay on after, like, I'm here, we'll answer all the questions, but we will get it out. Okay, so once you have established this person is regular, then they're in. If you don't know and you have documentation from an AD, I would say reply in an email. Is the intention that this person is only going to do 1 season? Or is this our volleyball coach? What can you do to support what bucket you're putting them in? You could even give them the eligibility checklist, right? But then you have to monitor. Like, if they're going to fill it out and put this person's temporary, well, then the intention is 1 year. Okay. But if they come back next year, now we really got to look at it. It's simply going to come down to what does your documentation say? So if I can get that, Aaron, if you can answer that, I'm so sorry. We got 9 minutes left. Okay, so if I'm looking on the chat and the poll for this last one, we have no continue tracking. Right. And here, yes, Denise, perfect. Here is it. Fiscal year July to June. That is what we are looking at. And if you use that eligibility calculator, it's going to keep it within that year. So here we have March and April in one fiscal year. We have July in the next fiscal year. So this person did not meet eligibility because it's only 2 months and 1 month. Now, if this person meets it in July and then that same fiscal year at the end of the year, they hit March and April, then that person's qualified and that person's in. It doesn't matter that they're not consecutive. Okay, if you're a new business manager, how do you know if you're supposed to be reporting wages and hours? We need a tool that addresses how to report wages and hours in a detailed manual. I'm not going to hit on this. I have hit on this. This is a table of contents for your manual. I can't say enough how much the employees here at NPERS look at this and how amazing the Ed Services Department puts this together. So if there's an issue, if there's something that's not in there, if there's something confusing, let us know. But that manual should tell you all of that. Our signing bonuses subject to retirement. I'm going to fly through this. You have these in your PowerPoint. Essentially, we are going to assume that all wages are pensionable unless otherwise noted in statute. Statute lists a lot of things that are not pensionable. So we're going to ask these standard set of questions. You've got the PowerPoint. You can go through those. Truly, if it's a fringe benefit or a bonus for services not rendered, then it's not going to be. But if you can tie it to services, it will be pensionable, okay? What we say is those questions that are on the PowerPoint, answer those. Go through and figure out, what happens if the employee quits? Do they have to pay it back? Do they have to work a certain amount of time to get a certain amount of those funds? And the problem in answering something like this that seems to be so simple is that, again, 265 school plan employers, and you all do things differently, and you all call them different things. And for multiple different schools that call something a signing bonus, they all have different facts and circumstances to them. So for this one, I would say use the PowerPoint, use the questions, answer those. And if you have questions, then contact us. And then we can get that documentation flow going, right? And we can look at it, you can look at it, we can have a mutual understanding on what it is. Hitting the citizenship, immigration, eligibility documentation, that got to a 2.6 hard. I won't live here for very long either. John hit this really well. But the question was, what information is not provided in the school manual that you wanted? And the person said citizenship eligibility is not clear. So I just want to tell you this is another thing we looked at, and it's another thing that we increased the information on. Currently, your manual says this, and the employee has a C33 status, receiving deferred action DACA. They're not eligible. Keep a copy and confirm. But on top of that, both the manual and the eligibility checklist have a link to this immigration eligibility checklist. DACA has never been allowed. However, DACA is now like the only status essentially that is ineligible. So that was the difference in statute. So the immigration eligibility checklist provides this information, but then provides a 3-step process. So number one, you determine if they're DACA. If they are, stop here, do not pass go, they are not eligible. If they're not, then you confirm lawful presence. Sometimes whatever document you were looking at also can be a form of confirming lawful presence. Sometimes it's not, but a license or a learner's permit could be what confirms lawful presence. But first you have to establish why are they here in the United States. And then the third step is just enrolling them if they're not, and then that continuous monitoring. The other thing that we got out was in the internal audit newsletter. We didn't necessarily know that this was still a pain point. So it was also in the internal audit newsletter, and it just walks you through. This is what you do with that reminder that statuses can change. Expiration dates can change. Like, just know, have a process that you are looking at that, and that your employees know that if their status changes, they need to let you know. Making corrections and adjustments. Just going to walk you through a couple screenshots here. So this is our website, and if you click on employer reports, it's going to have a drop down that then says Nebraska schools, and that is where you live. That is where all of this information is. So for people that are struggling on where to find things, hopefully at the end of this you won't. The question was, there's little, what do you want in the manual? And somebody said there's little to no information. All this that's highlighted is all on adjustments. It takes you screenshot to screenshot to screenshot. Sometimes I wonder if some of these comments are made because they're not looking at the most recent manual, because we do adjustments every year on it. So make sure you're looking at the most recent one. Make sure you pull it off of our website. But the other two things that were asked this year are for actual steps on adjustments and then specific examples. This is what I was talking about earlier. This is our last year's workshop, and the two things, one of them you were provided an email, is the examples, but these two tools were created for last year's workshop. They are linked to last year's workshop. They will also be linked to this year's workshop, but they are there. They are on the website, so you can get those. Somebody wanted to know how to explain to their members why the contribution rate keeps changing. So on the website also is the LB 645 notification, and it tells you in this highlighted part right here, it tells you why. you have a fully funded plan. That is dynamic. Understand that. Not all plans are fully funded. Not all plans that NPERS administers are fully funded. So it's a big deal. And so because you're fully funded, then you reap the benefits of that. Your employee contributions, and therefore employer contributions, and also if the state contributes, is dependent upon what the funding status is. The actuaries will tell us what the funding status is, and then that's the how and why it will change. Another thing asked was more information for employees nearing retirement, how retirement benefits work. So this information can all be found on the website as well. Know that the Ed Services Department holds planning seminars, retirement planning seminars. John talked about those, so I'm not going to live here for long either, but the employer is required to pay for 2 leave days for these. You are all members as well. So there's no age limit on when to attend these. It would probably be beneficial for you to attend one now, right? And just hear the information so you can help those that are going through it. You get way more than retirement information. There is always amazing feedback on these seminars. They feed you. I mean, it's great. Or you can do it via webinar and then you make your own food. But they're amazing. So take advantage. Tell all of your employees that they get to do 2 of them. I know John likes to say, you know, 1 right away and then 1 maybe towards retirement age. Who can see the notes section? Sammy hit over this. When you are uploading a note on your report, we can see it. I think there was some confusion maybe with a lot of blank notes that were on somebody's account, but I did a lot of testing. I talked to IT and accounting, and we can see the note. Sometimes there's going to be a blank note, maybe if you put something in there and deleted it, or there's a space, but if you put a note, it does help us. It's beneficial for everybody, I promise. I think it should be voluntary to participate. Why are the rules so complicated? Please go talk to your senator. It is, okay, your plan documents change based on the legislature, right? And the statute. So if you need and or want something changed, that's where you need to go. Make a way to look and see if new employees have ever been NPERS eligible. We have explored those options. We are trying. Know that our IT department was tasked with taking over OSERS, right? And that took a lot of staff. We are like anybody else. We are limited in resources. I think that's ending, and our IT department is going to have some more time. But even with that, there's some things when I have talked to IT about, is this a way that we can help streamline the process and help employers determine who's eligible or not? There are some snags. So we're looking at that. It has been suggested multiple times. Know that we will try. For now, though, give us a call. Ask the member and then give us a call. And a lot of talks about a website. They're struggling finding things. The 2 things I need you to look at are employer reports and then plan information. That all can be seen from that initial website page, and just scroll down the page. There's a lot of information because there needs to be a lot of information, but it is all there, I promise you. And if you struggle finding one tool or something in particular, let us know and we'll help you with that. People want to know if we can come further out west. Currently, that is not an option. We do the webinar, though. We do that, and then they do post it up on the website. So hopefully that is beneficial for people. They do want one contact for questions and answers, and that is your NPERS reporting. So Stephanie and Sammy, most of the time it's going to be Stephanie, and she's there. So send your questions to Stephanie. No matter who is in that seat, the email address will not change. So no matter what, somebody's going to be able to man that for you. Somebody asked for a current listing on the website of people at NPERS to contact regarding specific areas. So know that the manual does have NPERS staff listing, and that's in there. You can locate that there as well. Okay, the last two things that we won't live here for long either, but there were 10 people that submitted their survey after the deadline. And so the PowerPoint presentation was already done. But I did add these in because it did raise them to the 2.7, 2.9, and it's substitute service rules after termination and the LBA 24, the 120-day separation period. Again, I will reiterate, I don't think substitute service is going to be an issue because for 120 days, you cannot have any service, okay? And there is a complete webinar that is up on the website for the LB824, the 120-day separation period. You can watch that as well, but to show you other resources in the manual, these are screenshots directly from the manual. So there's people saying, I just don't know if they're 180 or 120, and the separation period is just a little bit confusing. And has that been updated in the manual? It has. So there are specific before May 1, 2026, which was the 180-day separation period, or after May 1, 2026, which is the 120. So it walks you through that. There's a whole chapter on terminating employment. Just remember that termination from all regular ongoing service, it does not apply if you do not take or apply for a distribution, right? So you can go from regular to substitute or regular to temporary. We talked about that, and then there's no limits on that. But the current rules do apply if you are taking a distribution. The manual further walks you through the 3 different separation periods that we have, and it gives you examples. Currently, we're talking about you could have people that are in 180 days or in 120 days, right? But you also have those people that were pre the later of start date. So your separation period starts the later of termination date or NPERS receipt of a valid distribution, which, let's look at teachers. If they are working, they typically know that they're going to be retiring at the end of the year. So they've already filled out that distribution application. So their later of would be their termination date. Other way around, if you have somebody that terminates and they don't want their money yet for whatever reason, then the application date would be the start of it. But there is a group that later of was not in effect, and it was termination date. And so they could have already completed their 180 days. It's confusing. I don't want to get into detail because it is confusing. The manual has that all in there for you. It has a chart to help you walk through the 180 and the 120, and it will help you on the classifications. So that is all I have. I actually managed 10 minutes left. If we have questions that have come up, Aaron, John, let me know. Aaron, do you want to start with the one question if I have time? If you haven't already answered that one?
I don't have like all the details, but they're asking if they would basically stop contributions if they work less than 20 hours or no contributions is needed. So I think that one kind of falls into, we don't know if they're currently contributing or if they're not contributing. So maybe just kind of giving a broad overview of that.
Perfect. So that just goes back to our buckets, right? If you have a coach that is in the regular bucket and they are contributing, then as long as they stay a regular employee, they continue on the next season, then they contribute. It doesn't matter hours, right? It's if they physically are removed from that regular bucket, if they're not a regular employee anymore. And then as far as what hours are reported, that's between the employer and the employee. So we have heard some things like, well, oh my goodness, where they're just going to, submit all these hours for all these things. That's between you and them. We have heard some employers say that your service, your stipend is paying for practices and review of video and games, and that's what it is. And if they do something over and beyond that, then they do something over and beyond that. That's not something that NPERS could say. So if the employer determines that that is service for that position, then it is, and then those would be reportable. April has in here, we have a teacher that has been with us for a couple of years beginning in August. Her employment will change to be only one contract year. It also states the teacher will resign at the end of the contract. Do you continue to make contributions? That one's a little hard, April, because I would assume the continuing contract clause would come into effect. That one I would probably want to actually see the documentation, the before and after, and ensure that it's not a continuing contract situation. So if you wanted to send that in, that would be great. Katie has, does NPERS fiscal year start July 1 within her answer for a poll? And so it does, just July 1 to June 30th. That is the fiscal year. Thank you all so much. There's 73 left hanging on. I appreciate you listening to me for over 2 hours talk. Let us know how we can help you. That is why we're here, for sure.
Yeah, so it kind of, the question that just came in expanded on that community coach. Additional question is, if a return coach who is currently not contributing is coaching less than 20 hours each week, then is contribution required? I think that's a pretty easy answer, but Vanessa, I'll let you kind of explain that on that.
Yeah, so a couple of things for eligibility, right? We're going to assume they're 18. We are going to assume they're lawfully present, and then we need to know where we classify them, what bucket they go in. And if they're a coach, generally that's regular, so we put them in the regular bucket. And then it's intention of hours. So the intention of hours is 20 or more, mandatory you put them in. If it's less than 20, right, then we track those hours. So you only put them in then if they hit the average of 20 hours a week in any 3 calendar months of the fiscal year, July to June. And that eligibility calculator that I was talking about, it actually does the formula for you. So it takes, and it's codified in statute to figure out what the average is. You take the total number of hours in the calendar month times the total number of days in the calendar month, divided by 7, because that gives you the week, and then you have that average. But don't worry about memorizing that formula. It's on the eligibility checklist. It's actually physically written on there. And then the eligibility calculator, it does all that for you. So do the audits typically review the prior year or multiple years? So the initial audit is for most likely the prior year. Sometimes some of the questions that we have to answer, like most of the time, I think it's establishing eligibility or not establishing eligibility or reviewing termination rules. Sometimes that will take us to further back past the year under audit, but the actual audit is typically for the prior fiscal year. And we do retirement year, right? So it doesn't matter what your fiscal year is or your school year, it's going to be July to June.
It looks like it could be a good question for the group. So they had a bus driver that was sick and took medical leave of absence starting at the end of October. The bus driver they had sub-bus drivers that covered until the employee had to resign at the end of December due to health reasons. Sub-bus drivers covered that position through the end of the school year, should the sub-bus driver have had retirement taken out. So I think the last part might get a little bit specific, but maybe you can just provide a general overview of that. So
yeah. So I'm going to focus in on the individuals that were filling in for the individual that left or that was on leave. So when the first bus driver was on leave, that bus driving route was still theirs, right? So they were a regular employee that was temporarily absent. That was their position. So anyone that filled in for those routes while that person was on leave was providing substitute service, because you're there, you're a temporary employee, you are filling in for a regular employee that's temporarily absent. Then once the first bus driver resigned, they were on leave and then they resigned, then the other individuals then would not be filling in for a regular employee that's absent. They would be filling in for a vacant position. So then you would just have to look at who is that employee Are they already in a regular bucket otherwise? Meaning, are they already a regular bus driver, or do they just pick up here and there? You have to look at who they are and what service they are and what bucket you would put them in. They definitely couldn't be in the substitute bucket, but they could be in the temporary bucket. So if they're only doing it for a month until you hire Sally to have that position, then that's temporary. So put them in the bucket, figure out what bucket they go into, and then you're going to look at the intention of hours. So you don't just put someone into the plan and start contributions because the other person is no longer on leave and they termed. You still have to establish, number one, what bucket are they in? And then two, what's that intention of hours? Hopefully that helped. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. We will close it out. Let us know if you have questions.